Greetings. In our short video series, I'm going to have a brief follow-up to a video I posted a couple of weeks ago that you can find over here, where I debunk the Economics Explained channel's very high traffic video about how not only is hyperinflation going to happen, which some people think, he claims it is already happening, and all his rationales are very, very weak, and all sorts of statistical sleight of hand and misrepresentation of data and so forth. But he posted that video back in April, and since hyperinflation has not been showing up, he's been getting worried, so he posted a brief follow-up video, and the subject of his follow-up video is just doubling down, claiming that, well, there's types of hyperinflation that are already occurring that people don't notice. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, if hyperinflation of anything significant is occurring, people will be unable to notice it for only a very short time. It will very quickly be noticed if it is anything of significance, and only products of significance should be tracked in terms of a basket of goods and the price of that basket of goods to assess whether there is hyperinflation. That's why I use that Goldman Sachs commodity index, because it's priced worldwide. But he continues to be very wrong, and even more wrong in some ways than his prior video. So we go to his new video, and as you can see, the title is How Price Inflation is Happening Without Anyone Realizing It. Ooh, it must be really high if nobody's realizing it. And I will do a point-by-point rebuttal of this video as well.
A lot of people, including myself, are very worried about inflation right now, particularly in the US. But what might be a more immediate problem is inflation's nasty little sidekick, shrinkflation. Companies...
Okay, right off the bat, I'll tell you, there's no way that a large economy like the United States can have inflation without all the economies that trade with the United States also having a similar amount of inflation. Inflation rates cannot be very different among countries that are similar per capita GDP and do a lot of trade with each other. So again, these economists with formal economist degrees are very theoretical creatures, and they just know so little about the real world. But now we get to the main crux of his video and how this shrinkflation concept is supposedly important enough to pay attention to.
Particularly those in the fast-moving consumer goods space, will reduce the size of their products slowly but surely over time while maintaining the same price. A 10-pack of instant ramen for $2 becomes an 8-pack and then a 6-pack and then a 5-pack, all for the same $2. Now, companies don't actually make much more money by doing this because the cost to produce the final product in these markets tends to be very small. The difference between a 5-pack and a 10-pack of ramen will only be a few cents of manufacturing. But what it does allow the company to do is reintroduce that same 10-pack of ramen a few months later, slap a family-sized sticker on it, and call the new $3 price tag a bargain without anybody noticing it's not really $1 off, it's 50% more than what we were paying just a few months ago.
Okay, where to begin? First of all, shrinkflation has occurred in anecdotal instances. We've all seen a 16-ounce pack of something be the same price for 14 ounces, but that's a one-time thing. They just can't do it again and again and again forever, because eventually people figure that out and it becomes very obvious. And why would this only be happening now? Sure, some types of products have gone from 16-ounce to 14-ounce sizes, but that is nothing new. It is not an ongoing trend of runaway inflation, and it's really no different than a product selling for $9.99 instead of $10 to psychologically make people think that something that is $10 is actually somewhat less than $10. That's nothing new, and unless it is continuous change, it does not comprise annual inflation. Now, the second point, even going a little bit outside of economics, he thinks all food is just processed food. Why would anyone only eat processed food like that? I can tell you for a fact that all real food, such as fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, and legumes, have not risen in price at all over the last 20 years. If you go actually buy individual tomatoes, carrots, celery bunches, and so forth, all of those are about the same price as 20 years ago. So the fact that he thinks processed food, and worst of all ramen, is food, if a large part of your expenditures are ramen, even a large part of your food expenditures are ramen noodles, one of the most processed foods around with one of the worst glycemic indices you could possibly find. You have much bigger problems than the esoteric subject of inflation as viewed from a hyper-theoretical economist. This is crazy. Note that not even a single picture in his ridiculous video was of actual whole vegetables and fruits. That's crazy. He says there's hyperinflation of food. Look at ramen. Ramen equals food. And not even once does he mention normal fruits and vegetables or beans or lentils or something, that might be healthy. Something that people 100 years ago might have recognized as food. Now, this is not a health channel, but the type of examples he chose are so incredibly ridiculous that I just have to skewer this video for saying the price of ramen noodles is rising because they're putting fewer packs in a crate, and therefore you're experiencing hyperinflation and your prosperity is going down. Foods that are that processed are like cigarettes. They're attacks on people who know nothing about health and have no self-control. If a large portion of your diet is processed food, you have bigger problems than worrying about the finer points of economics. I repeat again that the actual price of real fruits and vegetables, the type that you would buy in their whole form, the type that you might actually cut with a knife, and if a vegetable you might cook it in order to prepare it to eat, that has not risen at all. And to prove that, let me show you an important chart. This is a chart from The Economist. Even though it ends in 2010, it is relevant over here. These are the productivity gains of various industries. And construction, of course, is the one that has had no productivity gains since 1947. I have different videos on this channel about that. But look over here. Agriculture, the subject we're talking about right now, has had 1,600% gains from 1947 to 2010, and probably even more from 2010 to 2021 in the United States. Agriculture has become so productive. That's why fruits and vegetables in non-marked up supermarkets, don't go to some ultra high price, super curated marked up supermarket. Go to some very basic supermarket, preferably an ethnic one, where the fruits and vegetables are not super organized and only the best ones are presented because they threw out the other 9 out of 10. And you'll see the prices are ridiculously low. It's hard to rack up a bill of more than $4 or $5 in buying these fruits and vegetables, as long as you're buying them as proper produce, not all this canned and processed junk that we saw in that Economics Explained video. So not only is he doubling down on his hyperinflation narrative, but he's presuming that everyone's entire diet is processed food, and worst of all, things like ramen noodles. I mean, how can you take such a person seriously, and why would you listen to anything that he has to say? Agriculture productivity has been so high due to technological progress that the price of basic fruits and vegetables has not risen in my adult lifetime at all. And I can say that with complete certainty. It has become so inexpensive that this myth of food inflation is just completely out of the question. It's more a myth of processed food inflation. Processed food is not really food. It is merely a food-like concoction that was made in a factory. And people should know that difference. And like I said, processed food rising in price is just like cigarettes rising in price. It has about the same economic impact. It's a tax on lower information people with lower self-control. So I don't want this video to be too long, but I wanted to debunk the Economics Explained channel's latest doubling down on the narrative of high inflation, and how the examples he is choosing are getting weaker and weaker and weaker. I look forward to what he comes up with next, because he's not going to abandon this hyperinflation narrative, that's for sure. Thank you for watching.